feelings about art with you. Now, for me, art is a daily part of my life, but it's not always been like that. There's been big chunks of time where I've not picked up a pen and done anything remotely artistic for years at a time. Something changed back when the pandemic hit. We were about 6 months in and I just wanted to draw again. So I picked up a pen, some paints and started. I did make this sketchbook myself. It's a pleather cover. I've used my Posca pens to illustrate the front, and the paper is just Daler Rowney watercolour paper. Now I think it was an A3 pad, and I stitched it together and glued on the cover. I didn't want to buy very fancy watercolour paper because I didn't want it to intimidate me and stop me from making art, because the point for me is not about this sketchbook being a masterpiece, and you'll certainly see that it is not. It was more about getting pen or brush on paper every day and just seeing where the journey took me. So here we go. My very first page, and I've actually dated it here, was done on the 28th of September 2020. I think I'd been doodling for about a month, doing studies of artist work that I liked, but this was me picking up a sketchbook of my own and just getting on with it. Now, obviously not the most brilliant light and dark studies you've ever seen in your life, but it did get me using a set of heavy body acrylic paints that I've had for far too long and not used, and that for me was the most important thing, to just pick them up and make some art. I did this from life. I had these 2 miniature squash on my kitchen worktop and I just sat and painted, and this is what came out. I was really influenced at this time by the artist Lee Ellickson, who's also on YouTube. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of her if you're interested in the online art community. So quite a bit of the work from this sketchbook has sort of suggestions of her. And that really helped. It was like I was trying on other people's style at this point in my art journey to see what fitted for me, what I really liked to do, what I didn't like to do, and just seeing what line it brought out of me. So animals done in lots of colours, floral motifs are all a big part of Lee's work, but obviously I wouldn't think that she'd recognise this in the slightest as inspired by her. Again, not my best work in the world. This poor little baby hippo, let's just cover him up and enjoy how splendid his chubby mummy is. I was playing around with some royalty-free photographs of hippos and did various different techniques using a rainbow pencil, a brush liner which I promptly smudged and annoyed myself, some watercolour, just as a gesture drawing, using loose strokes, trying to get the form of a hippo without sort of reproducing him faithfully, and then finally this gouache study. Again, it's not perfect, but it's about trying things out and just seeing what works. At this time, I think Inktober was about to start, so I had my pot of India ink out, and here I've illustrated Brucey, the Australian shark, and Nemo and Dory, just for fun really. I don't think that this is a picture in and of itself or a screen capture. It's just taken from various images of all these characters, and I've stitched it together myself. Here's me trying out a load of different techniques, from watercolour and ink to watercolour pencil. I think that's watercolour and coloured pencil, and then pen and ink. Just to explore one subject with different media to see how it feels, see what is pleasurable to use and makes you want to do some more of it, and what you really don't enjoy, or what challenges you and you want to find out a little bit more about. Illustrating animals is something I really love. I think I have this daydream that one day I'm going to illustrate children's books. So the aim isn't to produce faithful reproductions of animals true to life, but to give character and sort of whimsy to them, and I think I've done that to varying degrees of success here. The poor little elephant looks a little bit strange and the tiger's a bit smushed up, but I do like this bear, and in particular how the colours bled together, and that was really fun. Now this is a cold press paper. It's very smooth. There's absolutely no tooth to it whatsoever, so it's not ideal for pure watercolour work. But even then, this was one of the first times I'd picked up my paints in years and done anything remotely serious. And here I'm using, I think it would have been Indanthro Bloom and Hematite Genuine by Daniel Smith to produce the tone around the bear, and I just really enjoyed that. So for me, it was worth it just to see how those colours married together on the page. You know, it doesn't have to be a finished work of art. That's not the point. This is about a daily practice in exactly the same way that people who love yoga and meditation make it part of their day-to-day life. Here we see me starting a challenge, and you're going to see a load of dinosaur illustrations. I'm sorry, that's just who I am. I love them, and I always have done since I was a wee little girl who dreamt of moving to Montana and becoming essentially the Alan Grant of the 1980s. Showing my age a little bit there. But anyway, a fellow Instagram artist called A Tiny K, and I will link her account in the description box below, put out some prompts. I think she called it Dinotober, and every day of the month of October we drew or painted in whatever way you liked, whether it's digital or analog, these fun little animals. And here we've got Rex from Toy Story, and then I used various different reference pictures to create this wee baby ankylosaur who is batting away a ball. So don't be surprised at the number of dinosaurs that you'll see in this sketchbook. It's just the way it is. And again, it was fun. It got me doing things. Now, this I would consider a bit more of a serious watercolour, but clearly this is very illustrative and sort of fun, using heavy black outline, which doesn't exist in reality. Not that a T-Rex slipping on a vinyl floor is reality, but there you go. And actually, I suppose reality isn't my husband's hands holding a baby raptor, but one can wish. Back in 2020, I finally dabbled with gouache paint, as you can see from various pages in this book. Now, I'd never used it before, so it has come off very, very childlike. The blending isn't brilliant. There's not a lot of shape and form to the animal, but I was pushing the paint around, seeing how it performs, experimenting with different thicknesses and opacities, and sort of working out how I like to use that media. And actually I decided that I felt more happy doing landscapes in gouache, so I developed a second sketchbook devoted to gouache landscapes. But that was kind of a spin-off from this original sketchbook where all my work has sort of sprung forth from. Here's me following along with a tutorial on this side from a fellow YouTuber called Nina, I think is how you say her name, or Nia. Lots of fall or autumnal motifs with your squash, pumpkin pie, mushrooms, hot chocolate, cinnamon buns, can't be without a cinnamon bun. And it was just exploring how to set up a nice composition actually on that page more than anything. I think composition is one of the hardest fundamentals of art to get to grips with. So rather than focusing on making each illustration absolutely perfect, I was more focusing on getting a nice balance on the page that I had, which is different dimensions to the artist I was following, and just seeing where it takes me. And overall, I was pretty happy with that. This watercolour is of Blue the Raptor for any Jurassic World fans. I love this actually. It's one of my favourite things that I did from that early phase when I just started making art again. Here's a relaxed Diplodocus sitting in this beach scene done in gouache, enjoying the lapping water and the sunset in the background. This was another prompt that I was answering during Dinotober. Why can't I say that word? Anyway, I think at that point I decided to leave gouache landscapes alone and take it to a sketchbook with more suitable paper and focus more on landscapes from reference photographs rather than imagined ones, which are always much more difficult when you're learning a new medium. Here we have a dinosaur, and for the life of me I can't even begin to imagine what the prompt would have been. I mean, why is this dinosaur wearing a Corinthian Greek warrior headdress and spearing some watermelon? I just don't have any idea. Answers on a postcard, please. Here we've got some ancient and modern facing each other off, and obviously there's this whole theory of how dinosaurs have evolved into birds, and I think I just really enjoyed how the pose of this little Procompsognathus or compy sort of facing off this turkey, and imagining him all puffed up trying to make himself huge and intimidating, so the scary little dinosaur is intimidated and runs off. I just really enjoyed that. Another tutorial from Nina Nee, this one trying to depict ocean waves using layers of paint of different opacities to produce the sort of ripples of water. I think this half of the page is less successful than this half, and I like that I got the transparency and you can almost imagine seeing the sand underneath, but really that's not the point. The point was seeing a different technique, wondering how to replicate it myself, getting curious and just having a go. Floral illustration was absolutely huge at this time, and you couldn't open Instagram and not see an illustrated pot plant, and I wanted to join in and have a go. I've never really felt that I've gotten to grips with it and sort of made my own unique style in reproducing plants, but I'm going to keep on going with that from time to time. I find it really difficult, so it's not something that I force myself to do, but living in the new house that we live in now, we're surrounded by flowers, so I've got plenty of subject matter to have a go with. I just need to get a bit braver and have another go. Here we've got a giraffe in fancy dress. Obviously he is a stegosaur, so when you think of a dinosaur going to a Halloween party, I think that's probably what this prompt was. This is clearly where my mind goes. Someone in work said to me recently that they'd like to be inside my brain and see how it works. And well, a giraffe dressed as a stegosaurus is clearly the answer to that question. I think for me it was just more about picking a colour scheme, so going with this yellow and green, and of course we don't know for sure what dinosaurs look like, so you can use any colours that you like, and then creating some motifs around it to produce this illustration, and just exploring how the different colours work against each other. Yeah, really it was just practice, nothing more deep and meaningful than that. Another plant, but I think that one was a little bit more successful. That one's done in gouache, and I think I've got a bit more depth there, but I think there's definitely still work to be done for me. I want to be able to be at the point where I can pull leaves off the page and push ones back where they are in the background and they're not meant to be the primary focus, and that's a struggle to this day. Here we're getting very close to Halloween, I think, with an Inktober inspired piece done in my Indian ink with a paintbrush, and some fine liner as well. Here we've got this creepy haunted house with a pumpkin that might have been slashed by a passing velociraptor. And when we get inside and go up to the first floor, lo and behold, there is a T-Rex on the patrol, looking for someone to eat and flying across. Now, of course, in modern day, you'd probably much more likely to see a bat than a pterosaur. But hey, this is my sketchbook. It doesn't matter. And that's the thing. This was tons of fun. This engaged a part of my brain that has been inactive from childhood, really, and I just love doing it, so why the hell not? This was me pulling out the acrylic paints I've had since I was about 15 years old, so they are extremely old now, but I wanted to see what I could do with them. I have a limited palette of De La Rowney acrylics with like a magenta, cyan, like an acid yellow, black and white, and not much else, and this is what I came up with. It's a landscape with baobab trees. It is what it is. It was pushing paint around a page. It's certainly not going to be in a gallery anytime soon. Here's a go at me imagining a moose, and I think you always notice that when I've imagined an animal and trying to draw it, it's never worked out as well as when I've used reference images. Like, these guys are all little British short hair cats as far as I'm aware, and I used photographs or videos as I was scrolling through Instagram one day to do quick little sketches and then add some watercolour later. I think that these look far more lifelike than this moose, or actually it might be a reindeer. I think it's a reindeer that I was just imagining the form of. And I think that's so key with art. If you want something to be realistic, you need to study a subject. You need reference photographs or the real thing in front of you, and you paint what you see, not what you know to be there. And that phrase is one of the things that I've carried with me right the way through from teenage art classes at school. I can hear Mr. Critchley, one of the 3 art teachers I had, saying that phrase to me to this day: draw what you see, not what you know to be there. And clearly I didn't, and I paid the price for it. Now, I was trying to experiment with a painterly style for this reindeer here, using my gouache, and trying to use blocks of colour to pull a piece together. Now, I have this failing where I think I'm going to master a technique on the very first try. And whilst this isn't a bad painting, you know, it's a fine sketchbook page, there's light and dark, you can tell that it's meant to be a reindeer, yada shmada. It isn't what I was going for. If you imagine artists that paint more with dabs than with big swooping brush marks, and the colours just sort of muddle together, and somehow out of this vortex of colour and line and mark making, an image comes out of it. Now, clearly I don't have the skills to do that, but it was a start, it was a practice. Here's me drawing one of my favourite animals, a red panda, in some watercolour. It just didn't come off as well as I was hoping for. I've not really got any contrast. There's a bizarre light area here where there would be none in reality. But it's a reasonable panda face, not too bad. Wood grain there, I quite like that branch. And the colours were fun to experiment with and see how dark I could get my darkest tones. But yeah, not my greatest work by a mile. And ditto, this wasn't really. Again, it suffers from a lack of contrast, these 2 nuzzling lions. I had this grand image of intricate patterns sort of being weaved into the lion's mane, and I clearly gave up after just this wee little section here. I think I could see that it wasn't going in the direction that I had it in my mind's eye, and I just finished it, turned the page and moved on. That's the thing about sketchbooks, there's always more paper in the world. And here I was practicing drawing from reference photographs of animals, but doing it with pen first. So this is with permanent ink. I typically start with a very fine tip fine liner, like my Copic 0.05, which is this pen, a multi-liner SP. And making sort of loose sketchy marks to sketch out the proportions of the animals, so hopefully they end up looking recognisable. I think I got a bit impatient to finish the spread, so the raccoon's face isn't quite in proportion, it's a bit longer than it should be, but I love this monkey and the nuzzling hippos and that majestic looking lion. I really did enjoy that, and I think drawing just comes so naturally to humans, you know, from when you're a toddler, you pick up pens or pencils and scribble away and make marks, and before you know it, you're producing stick men that look like mum and dad, and family portraits and houses with rectangular windows and curly-whirly steam coming out of their chimneys. And you just need to harness that childlike curiosity, that desire to depict what you see, your interpretation of the world around you on the page. So I think don't be scared of drawing. Drawing is fabulous. It's a learned skill. Anyone can do it. And never be put off looking at really good artists. Not that I'm suggesting I am. Here's some pencil sketches, because pencil was my chosen media for so long. I think because at school, when I was doing my GCSE art, we had to do so many tonal studies of piles of shoes or crumpled up Coke cans or biscuits tumbling out of their packets, that I often do work just in pencil and don't add colour whatsoever. Here was an adorable little dormouse that had been rescued on Instagram. I saw this reel where they were sat in a tiny little walnut shell and being held up by the lady that had rescued him. And I just loved him so much I wanted to reproduce him on my page. And again, at the time, I was watching The Mandalorian, one of those Star Wars spin-offs. Now, I know nothing about Star Wars really, apart from liking R2-D2 and absolutely adoring Baby Yoda. But there we go. It was just a little bit of fun, a little bit of practice, and recording something that I really enjoyed in my sketchbook. Here's me practicing from real life. Now, sometimes I feel a little bit frustrated when artists give you a tutorial where they walk you through how to reproduce a piece of art exactly how they've done it, because anyone can learn that skill. It might take some people longer than others, but if you work at it enough, you should be able to reproduce that work to a reasonable degree of likeness. But I think the real challenge is depicting the world that you see around you in your own style. And here I had this poinsettia plant on my desk, and I was picking out different leaves and exploring mixed media with coloured pencils and watercolour. I've got some permanent ink there, I've got some felt tips, all sorts of markers and things, just seeing what marks I could make. I think probably that leaf is the most successful out of the lot of them, but overall I'm generally not happy. But I had a go. I used my observational skills and got some drawings on the page, and that's the most important thing. Back to animal portraits. Who doesn't love an animal portrait? You'll probably be sick of seeing them from me in future videos. But here we have this gorgeous black and white wolf with his stunning blue eye peering back at us. And then a bit more success with the gouache, painting some Christmas decorations I made out of felt, and had just finished that year actually, so I wanted to paint them in my sketchbook as a memory for the future. And here is a little self-portrait of me with my hot chocolate in my Christmas pudding hat, which I wear every single year come November until about mid-February. I absolutely love coffee art, whether it's the actual latte and the beautiful designs that you can get, though the barista can get, certainly not me, or paintings, whether they're pencil or paint or what have you. And here I've used coloured pencil for the majority of it, and I think with a little bit of white Posca pen for the highlights on the chocolate chips. I was trying really hard to get the light and dark right, so that those marshmallows popped off the page, and to try and make the chocolate chips glossy as they would be in real life. But again, it's not 100% successful, but I haven't done that many of these images before, and it would have been better to do it from a real drink in real life than from the photograph I was using from a royalty-free website. Here's me having a practice doing some watercolours of robins, or bobbies as they're known in my family. I think that's a peculiar thing to us. Not many people seem to know what I mean when I say bobby or bobby robin, but this is what they are. This is a European robin. It looks quite different to the American version, and they just bring such joy. I just adore seeing little flashes of oranges zooming around the garden. They're most associated with the winter time, so you'll see them depicted on holly branches or pine trees, but they're a perennial bird and you can see them in British gardens all throughout the year. Like I said, I don't know much about Star Wars, but I did really enjoy painting R2-D2 as a robot. He's got lots of knobs and sort of detail to get stuck into, and there's opportunity to create some form with light and shade around the cylinder of his body. And here's me painting what could be a greeting card, a Christmas card, with the phrase Merry Droidmas, with R2-D2 dressed as a reindeer in a snow globe. I mean, obviously. Here's me doing a couple of little gingerbread men. Now these are actual cookies that I made and took a photograph of years and years ago when a friend of mine wrote and published a book called Brilliant Biscuits, and these were the first thing that I made using her recipes. I painted this little gingerbread man and gingerbread woman, and then I gave them a little gingerbread sausage dog, because every family needs a dog. And then I created this house, a sort of winter wonderland, and built this story around them, where their gateposts are made from candy canes, and their shrubbery are actually peppermint swirl meringues with lollipop trees and ginger cookie biscuit trees, and of course this is icing and not snow on the roof. It was just loads of fun. And that's it. You know, you want to have fun, you want to let go, you want to lose yourself in a painting and just enjoy and see what comes of it. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece, it just has to be enjoyable, and that's the point of art making for me. I was starting to practice more floral art in a separate sketchbook at this point, and these were me following along with a Peggy Dean Skillshare course on gouache florals, and I think this is from me following along with Shader Campbell, who does a lot of floral art on YouTube, but I might be wrong about that. I should have written a note on this actually, looking back. But anyway, it was an exploration. This felt much more accomplished compared to other things that I've done in the past. But remember, you don't have to start one sketchbook and finish it completely. You can run them in tandem, which is why I have a separate floral sketchbook. So this looks a lot better than some of the earlier botanical illustrations, but I've done 50 or 100 pictures of flowers in between these, so it's not a sequential sort of progression in my work as such. Now here I was playing around with some botanical illustration. Now I really love hand lettering and all things bullet journal related, and you see a lot of these from bullet journalists who do a lot of art in their journals. Typically this would be on a cover page and there'd be the month written in some beautiful calligraphy in the middle. Here's me just playing around with some design ideas, trying to be original, but that's really difficult when social media is absolutely flooded with these images. This is me trying to work out composition, and well, I'm not unhappy per se by how I've composed this bouquet. I do wish that I'd got the detail and looseness balance better. These berries I think I'm happy with. They look like what they're meant to look like, but these flowers get a little bit lost. So it's not the most successful thing I've ever done, but composition is so difficult to get a handle on, that just feeling that I achieved that element was enough for me. More pencil sketches of flowers, absolutely determined to get them more recognisable, but again not entirely succeeding. This is done with coloured ink, so it's not watercolour, it's actual permanent ink in a magenta tone. And looking at this now, I'm really annoyed that I gave no shadow to the base of this glass that the single bloom is standing in, so it looks like it's floating in midair. Yeah, let's just move on. These are some mark making exercises from Kate Cook, who is a gouache artist, and she has a Skillshare class. This one was called Adventures in Gouache, Painting and Pattern Making Techniques. And whilst I don't feel like I produce the most artistic or painterly marks ever, it's always good to try these exercises and just see what comes out of you naturally. I mean, the idea is to just see what you can do with the paint and the paintbrush that you have. There's no set pattern to follow or anything like that, so it's just an exploration. I think mine always comes off a bit forced looking and really quite childlike, but I guess that just means I haven't done it enough, and I should devote more pages of a probably cheap sketchbook to practice this and just see how I can develop my mark making further. And this was the sort of class project I did after following through Kate's instruction, just of random objects I found on my desk. It's not really meant to, well, it's clearly not meant to be realistic. It's just meant to be illustrative and to use marks to suggest the form of an orange, the curve of a washi tape roll, the light and dark on a button. It's not meant to be a literal translation, and clearly things aren't outlined in their complementary colours in real life, are they? Now, watercolour was the paint medium that I reached for first as a child, and to this day I use almost daily. But it's really difficult, and actually that's when the sketchbook paper I used started to let me down, because these watercolours are meant to be loose, really expressive, sort of old decaying doorways with branches of flowers and views through beautiful windows. They're really gorgeous things to paint in watercolour, but being such a smooth cold press paper with absolutely no tooth, which means no texture to it, there's not a lot of blooming, and you don't get to sort of show off the granulation of these paints to their full advantage. But it was a start, and I'm not unhappy with it. Another Peggy Dean class doing a radish and some carrots, and this was just about letting the paints bleed into each other, being loose and allowing marks to suggest the fronds on the top of the carrot. This was all about blooms in particular, and how you get cauliflowering when you're working wet in wet, which means dropping paint into a wet part of your page and just letting it do its thing and move and sort of interact with the other pigments. It's really unpredictable, you never know what you're going to get, but you can produce some really beautiful results if you're willing to be brave enough and let it sort of go to chance how your painting is going to turn out. Yeah, more florals using mixed media. This is me mixing my primary coloured set of permanent inks. I think there's some gouache, there's some coloured felt tips, some fine liner in permanent ink. Yeah, it's not great, but it was an attempt at getting what I'm trying to get there is to get a loose flower, but not so loose that it just looks like a random splash of abstract art on the page. And I always feel like I'm much more happy and confident when I've got a black pen to do some outlining, but of course that's really not realistic, is it? And I want to be looser. So this page for me is sort of representing me attempting to be loose and certainly not achieving it. But I went a little bit better, I think, when it came to doing this red panda, which is a lot better than the one I'd done previously. And again, in a separate sketchbook, I'd done lots of pencil studies of pandas by this point to understand their proportions and their expressions a bit better. And this is done purely in watercolour with no pencil first, and loose sort of expressive marks to suggest the lovely fuzzy tummy and his nice white beard and whiskers, and the shiny nose of this little panda gazing up at a piece of bamboo. A more illustrative gouache floral composition, much happier with this. It was done using reference photographs of real flowers, so I had a picture of a lily, I think that would have been an anemone, I can't remember exactly, and then I kind of stitched them together in my mind and came up with this composition. And then following Kate Cook's advice, I've gone very illustrative with solid colours, using patterns instead of sort of more true to life rendering of the flowers, and I like that. I could see that as a print, I could see that on a tote bag. This is me trying a bit of urban sketching, something I so desperately want to be good at, but feel so desperately uncomfortable doing. It's not that I mind being seen painting in public, it's not that at all. It's just, I just really struggle with it. I just never produce a result that I'm happy with. And obviously this is done right at the beginning of COVID, so I was at home and I had a picture from a street in London on my iPad, and I was sketching and painting away from that. And I'm not unhappy with it, but if you'd have plonked me down on that street, I can tell you now the picture would not have been as nice as that. Not that this is the best piece of work you've ever seen. More animals. We have a kookaburra, and I think the idea for me here was trying to give the animal more detail so he pops off the page, but keeping the background very loose and suggestive. And I think I could have amped up the contrast a bit more so that the bird does jump off the page a bit more than he does now. And again, I can see looking back that I've not really got his proportions right. But I'm never going to produce a brilliantly rendered animal in gouache or watercolour if I don't practice. So here we go. There's some practice for you. And a couple of bears. Who doesn't love a big brown bear? Well, we've got one brown bear, one black bear. I really enjoyed that, sort of capturing their goofy expressions. It brings me such joy. Here's another whimsical illustration. We've got a little robin who lives in Redbreast Valley. His house is a giant mushroom, and overhead we have a bumblebee flying past. Instead of trees, he's got little flowers. What would they be? Are they bluebells? Snowdrops? I don't know. A chrysanthemum and some other little flowers I don't know the name of. I don't know the names of flowers at all, I'm sorry. But that was just me being inspired by work from other artists doing illustrations for Inktober and seeing what I could come out of my imagination with it. And on that day, that's what came out. More practice with gouache and a sort of urban sketching sort of vibe or landscape vibe. We've got this little Vespa parked up at a bar. Again, I think contrast lets me down, but I'm happier with the blending that looks a bit more organic and natural than I have been for the previous ones in the sketchbook. Here's me trying my hand at a windmill. Yeah, it's all right. I'm happy with the blending in the foreground. That's about it, really. These are just some clementines done in gouache, and I deliberately chose complementary colours. They pop off the page, and had loads of fun trying to use little white or black dots to show the little dimples on the skin of the oranges. I don't think that's the last time you'll see a painting of an orange from me. I really enjoy doing those still lives. This is me following along with a tutorial from Ruth Wilshaw, where she takes you through techniques to paint skies in gouache. Now, she teaches you how to paint practically anything landscape related in gouache, but in this instance it was all about skies. And when you've worked through that, you can pick from a huge back catalogue on her Patreon of monthly roulette challenges, where she gives you 4 random words and then sets you free to create a composition. And in this instance it was dark, ocean, tree roots and island, and this is what I came up with. I had loads of fun. It stretched my imagination. It let me practice using the paints and seeing how I could get them to blend and what marks I could make with my brush. And yeah, it was a worthwhile exercise, and I really love Ruth. Ruth is a fabulous tutor, and I highly recommend her to anyone who's interested in learning more about gouache. This was the product of me not being able to sleep and trying my hand at doing some metallic shiny balloons in mostly gel pen, I think, and this is just a black permanent ink brush pen for the strings. I had loads of fun trying to get the shiny bits nice and shiny and give form to the numbers. But yeah, that was another thing that was super popular on Instagram, and I just wanted to practice. Blue tits, another favourite garden bird of mine. I've done lots of pictures and scribblings of them over the years. I just wish that I had zoom lens for my camera so that I could get some of my own reference images from when they're in my garden, because they just move so fast that there's never a second to sit down and sketch them. This was actually from leftover gouache paint on my palette, and I just wanted to let loose and see what came out of it, you know, and to play with the colour scheme that I had, rather than to be more sort of decisive and pick those colours beforehand. And what I created was this sort of lonely road with an overgrown tree over the top of it, and a really moody dark sky, and I really like that actually. I was really happy with this piece. And yeah, that just came out of some leftover muddied paints. Who'd have known? These are from, I can't remember his first name. He's a Californian artist. It might be Matt or Mike or Mark Bolter. And he does the most beautiful gouache floral illustrations you've ever seen. And these are the product of me following along with his instruction from the book of his I bought. It's clearly nowhere near as good as his work. His is absolutely immaculate. But I really enjoyed stepping into another artist's shoes and being sort of led by the hand and shown how to create the textures and how to render the shapes. And how to compose the elements together so that it gave a pleasing final result. And I think that's the fun thing about using other artists' work to develop your own. It's not about copying their image, because that in an exercise is totally meaningless in itself. It's about using their techniques and seeing the world through their eyes, and then taking that and applying it to your work and how you see the world around you. So yeah, I would always recommend following tutorials from artists that you like, but not copying their work as such, just using their techniques to develop your own. Here's me trying to do a sort of rainbow floral plant-based J and N. J for Jodie, my name is Jodie, and N for Neil, my husband's name is Neil. I think I was getting bored at this point, and I could see that whilst it started off nice and detailed, and there was a bit more to the illustrations at the start, I think, you know, oh God, a child could have drawn a better aubergine than that. But hey ho, it is what it is. It's an idea that didn't pan out. In fact, what it is I have this long-held dream of illustrating an alphabet, either with plants or with animals for each of the letters. And I think this is me playing around and seeing what came out of my imagination organically. And then when it wasn't the finished piece that I'm dreaming of in my mind, I went, sod that, and turned the page. And here we have the final spread. An ink drawing of a French bulldog and a gouache drawing or painting of some apple blossoms. And I think this is much more successful than previous illustrations, and I've got that differentiation between light and dark. You've got this lovely central flower, and then the ones in the background and the leaves in the background are much darker than those in the fore. And I just think it's more successful than the other pieces. And the mark making the veins on the flower are much more realistic, although it's still not meant to be photorealism than those earlier pieces you saw at the beginning of my sketchbook. But there we go, that was finished on the 21st of February 2021. So that was 4 months or so, and I had plenty of other sketchbooks on the go at the same time. But needless to say, all I wanted from today was to show you how you can start, that it doesn't matter that a sketchbook doesn't have a continuous theme from start to finish. It's there to practice, it's there to experiment, and for me it's all about the making and not the final result. So if you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me at The Frosted Blueberry on Instagram, and hopefully my website will be up and running any day now. So make sure you subscribe to see more from The Frosted Blueberry art.